You know those photos, right? The really chaotic ones.
Oh, yeah.
A crowded street, maybe people all tangled up, somebody at a weird angle,
Yeah.
trying to figure out exactly what each person is doing, their pose, their actual shape,
Yeah.
just from that flat picture. It's hard for us.
And it's a major headache for computers, absolutely.
Right.
The whole goal of human pose and shape estimation, HPS, you take a 2D image, you try to build a 3D model of the people in it. Well, it really hits a wall in those messy, real-world scenes.
So what did people try before?
Historically, computer vision methods kind of went down two main paths, and honestly, both had pretty big problems. One way was to just crop out a tiny picture of each person.
Isolate them?
Yeah, analyze just that little patch.
But then you lose everything else. The
Yeah.
context, right? Who they're interacting with, what's around them, their place in the whole scene.
You lose the forest for the trees, exactly. All that crucial interaction detail is gone.
Okay, so that's one path. What was the other?
The other approach tried to look at the whole scene, the entire image, which, keeps the context.
That sounds better.
It does, but those methods often struggled just to find everyone accurately, especially in dense crowds or when people were overlapping a lot. Occlusion, we call it. They just couldn't reliably detect everyone they needed to reconstruct.
So you were stuck. Either you had the context but couldn't find the people, or you found isolated people but, well, lost the context.
Pretty much. It was a real catch-22.
Feels like a fundamental roadblock. You really need both things. And I guess that's where this new research we're diving into today comes in, this method called Prompt HMR.
That's exactly it. This deep dive is all about Prompt HMR, and it represents, I think, a really significant shift. Its fundamental innovation is moving away from just pixels to parameters.
Pixels to parameters.
Yeah.
Meaning just looking at the image data and guessing the 3D stuff.
Right. Looking at the image pixels and trying to directly regress or estimate the 3D body shape and pose parameters. Prompt HMR, instead, it reformulates the whole problem.
Reformulated.
So the core idea, the really new thing, is bringing in extra information to help the model make sense of the image. They call it side information, or prompts.
Prompts.
Like clues. Exactly like clues. Think of it like giving the AI helpful hints, not just throwing raw visual data at it and hoping for the best.
Okay, so it's not just the image anymore. That sounds like a genuinely different approach to AI perception.
It's a really powerful pivot, yeah. It basically acknowledges that for complex stuff, like understanding humans in really messy scenes, maybe the raw pixels aren't quite enough. You can leverage other information, external knowledge perhaps, to guide the model.
And the payoff.
Well, the payoff, as the paper shows, is much more accurate, much more robust 3D human reconstruction. It's achieving state-of-the-art results, especially in those really tough scenarios, the crowded ones, the ones with interactions where older methods just got stuck.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. So the big innovation is this idea of integrating prompts. Let's maybe get a bit more academic here, really unpack the novelty. How does this actually work? What are these prompts, and how does Prompt HMR use them to tackle those tricky problems like occlusion or people interacting?
Right, and this is where the core academic contribution lies. Prompt HMR frames HPS estimation as a promptable task. That's the key phrase. It explicitly takes the image plus these other pieces of information as its input.
Okay.
And these prompts can be broadly spatial, telling the model where something is, or they can be semantic, giving it more conceptual information about the person or the scene.
All right, let's start with spatial prompts. Are we talking about something simple like drawing a box around a person?
Yes. Bounding boxes are a really key type of spatial prompt, and this directly tackles that detection problem we mentioned earlier. Even if you can't get a perfect, clean crop of every single person in a super dense crowd, you can often still get a rough bounding box, maybe even just around their face or upper body. Prompt HMR can take that box.
Use it as a hint.
Exactly. Use it to focus its attention, but, and this is crucial, it still processes the entire high-resolution image.
I see. So it's like saying, okay, look here for a person, but keep the whole background, the whole scene in mind for context.
Yeah.
That really sounds like getting the best of both worlds.
It is. It gets around the detection failures of those older full image methods because you're telling it where the people likely are, but it keeps the scene context that the crop-based methods just threw away.
Makes sense. Are there other spatial prompts besides boxes?
Yeah, segmentation masks. So providing the exact pixel boundaries for a person.
Even more precise.
Much more precise. And these are incredibly useful when people are really overlapping significantly. It helps the model disentangle who's who, which pixels belong to which person.
Okay, so spatial prompts help find people and separate them in the scene. What about the other kind? Semantic prompts. What sort of conceptual information are we adding there?
Semantic prompts add that higher level meaning, stuff that's, really hard to figure out just from the pixels, especially from a single 2D picture. One really interesting example they use is a natural language description about body shape.
A text description, like what?
Simple things like a muscular and tall male.
Wait, you give it text. How does writing muscular help figure out the 3D shape?
Well, think about it. Estimating precise 3D body shape from just one 2D photo is notoriously tricky. There's perspective distortion, inherent ambiguities. Is that person large or just close to the camera?
Right.
A text description, like muscular, gives the model a really strong prior, a strong hint. If the model knows it's trying to reconstruct someone described as muscular, it can guide its shape prediction towards a form that actually matches that description. It helps resolve ambiguities the visual data alone just can't.
Wow.
And they even automated generating these descriptions during training using a separate process to look at 3D models and create text like that.
That's fascinating. Using language to, constrain a geometry problem? Are there other semantic clues?
Another really critical one, and this directly addresses the challenge of people interacting, is a simple binary label. Just a flag saying whether two specific people are in close contact and likely interacting.
Just yes or no, they're interacting. That sounds almost too simple.
It might sound basic, but it acts as a kind of trigger inside the model's architecture.
A trigger. What does it switch on?
If that interaction prompt is active for a pair of people, the parts of the model processing those two individuals, they're processing tokens, they get routed through a special component. It's called cross-person attention.
Cross-person attention. So the model is specifically told, pay attention to how these two relate to each other.
Precisely. It's a dedicated mechanism that lets the model explicitly think about their relative positions, how their limbs might be overlapping, how one person's pose affects the others.
I see.
Without being prompted that an interaction is actually happening, a standard model might really struggle. Producing two separate 3D models that make sense when limbs are intertwined or one person is blocking part of the other. It's hard.
Yeah.
But by telling the model about the interaction using this prompt, Prompt HMR activates this specialized processing pathway. And that leads to much, much more accurate reconstructions of those complex interpersonal dynamics.
What's really interesting there is it's not just passively hoping the model figures out the interaction from the pixels. It's being given that information, that semantic clue, and then using a dedicated piece of the architecture to handle it better.
Exactly. It highlights the power of integrating these different types of information.
So, let's talk architecture then. How is this system actually built to juggle the image, the location hints from the boxes or masks, the shape language, the interaction flags?
Yeah.
How does it all come together?
Yeah, great question, because the architecture is really what enables this whole promptable task idea. It basically has three main stages. First, there's a powerful image encoder. They use a vision transformer, specifically a pre-trained Dino V2 model, which is known to be really good at capturing rich visual features. And critically, it processes the entire image at high resolution. This makes sure the system always has that full scene context we talked about.
Right, so step one. Get a really good context-rich understanding of the whole picture.
Exactly. Then step two is the multimodal prompt encoder. This is the part that takes all those different kinds of prompts we discussed, the bounding box coordinates, the segmentation mask pixels, the language embeddings that represent the text descriptions.
From something like CLIP?
Yeah, using something like CLIP to turn the text into vectors. And it also takes those binary interaction labels, it translates all of these very different inputs into a consistent format. Basically into token vectors, which are like little packets of information that can then interact with the image features. And importantly, if a particular prompt isn't available for someone, say, you don't have a text description, it just uses a learned null token. So the system's flexible.
Clever. So the image gets processed, the prompts get encoded into these compatible tokens. Then how does it actually bring them together?
That's the third stage, the transformer decoder. This decoder takes the prompt tokens we just mentioned, along with some learned query tokens for each person it needs to reconstruct, and it uses a transformer's attention mechanism. But crucially, it attends to both the deep image features coming from that big vision transformer and the prompt tokens from the multimodal encoder. It's this multi-headed attention that really acts as the engine, integrating the visual data with all the guiding information from the prompts.
And the output of all that attending and decoding is the final 3D human model.
Yes, exactly. It outputs the parameters for the SMPL-X body model. That's a standard way to represent the 3D pose, the shape, and the translation or position for each person detected. And remember, tucked inside this decoder are those special cross-person attention layers that only get activated when that interaction prompt is present.
Right.
So the whole architecture is really designed from the ground up to intelligently fuse the visual information with whatever diverse side information you provide through the prompts.
Okay, so that's the how. You process the whole image, encode the prompts, use a multimodal decoder to combine everything, and out comes the 3D model.
Yeah.
How does this whole promptable approach actually stack up against those older methods, the crop-based ones and the full image ones we started with?
Well, it represents a pretty significant leap forward. Like we said, those crop-based methods, things like CCLIF or HMR 2.0, they were decent for isolated people, but really struggled in scenes with occlusion or interaction because they just lacked the context.
Yeah.
And the full image methods, like BEV or multi-HMR, they kept the context, which was good, but they often failed at that crucial first step, just reliably detecting and initializing all the people, especially in crowded scenes. They'd miss people.
So Prompt HMR is trying to get the accuracy of the crop methods, but with the robustness of the full image methods, kind of bridging that gap.
That's a great way to put it, exactly. By processing the full image, but also accepting spatial prompts like bounding boxes, even if they're a bit rough or only cover part of the body, it bypasses that detection failure problem that plagued the old full image methods.
Okay.
And then by using prompts like segmentation masks for overlap or the interaction labels for contact, it can accurately handle the really complex stuff, the occlusions, the interperson dynamics that tripped up both of the previous types of methods.
And the result?
The result is state-of-the-art accuracy across the board on standard benchmarks. It often matches or even beats the best crop-based methods on single-person metrics, but crucially, it shows vastly improved robustness and accuracy in those challenging multi-person scenes.
That's impressive. And it seems it handles video, too. How does it adapt for motion?
Yeah, there's an extension called Prompt HMR Vid, specifically designed for estimating human motion over time and even trying to place it in world coordinates.
Okay.
So after processing each video frame individually using the core Prompt HMR image model, it takes the per-person output tokens from consecutive frames.
Right, the results for each person in frame 1, frame 2, frame 3.
Exactly, and it feeds those sequences of tokens into another module, a temporal transformer.
Temporal transformer, is that what makes the motion look smooth?
Yes, that's a big part of it. This module learns to enforce temporal stability and smoothness. It makes sure the motion looks natural and consistent from one frame to the next, instead of looking all jittery or discontinuous. It also does something else important. It estimates joint contact probabilities. Basically, it tries to figure out, for each joint, like a foot, is it likely touching the ground in this frame?
That sounds really useful. Why focus on contact?
Because it helps dramatically reduce that really common, really annoying visual artifact you see in a lot of video HPS work called foot skating.
Oh, I know that, where the feet look like they're sliding on ice instead of planting firmly on the ground.
Exactly. It looks totally unnatural. This contact probability information allows them to add a post-processing step that optimizes the motion, specifically encouraging zero velocity for joints that are likely in contact with the ground. It effectively helps plant the feet.
So, conquering the dreaded foot skating. Okay, so Prompt HMR Vid takes the per-frame 3D models, uses this temporal context and contact info to make smooth, stable, less skatey motion sequences. And you mentioned world coordinates.
Yeah, it moves towards that by integrating with estimations of camera movement and scene depth, trying to place the motion in a consistent 3D world space, not just relative to the camera.
So it really extends that promptable, context-aware power into dynamic scenes and full-body motion analysis.
Just the idea, yes.
Okay, we've covered the core innovation, this promptable task idea, the different kinds of prompts, spatial and semantic, the architecture designed to fuse them, how it performs better than older methods, and even the video extension. What are the current limits? Where do the researchers see this heading next?
Well, the main limitation they acknowledge is that while the system can use all these powerful prompts, some of them, especially the semantic ones like the shape descriptions or the interaction labels, currently have to be provided manually when you want to use the system on a new image or video.
So if I have a new photo, I might need to actually draw the boxes myself, maybe type in, this person looks tall, or click a button saying, these two are interacting.
Exactly. In its current form for inference, that's often the case. So automating this prompt generation is highlighted as a really critical direction for future work.
How would they automate that?
They propose integrating Prompt HMR with vision language models, or VLMs.
VLMs? You mean models that understand both images and text, like CLIP or GPT-4 with vision?
Precisely. Models like that are getting really good at understanding the overall scene content, the semantics, identifying objects and people, and relating it all to natural language.
And so the VLM could look at the picture.
Yeah, VLM could potentially analyze the scene, identify the people, maybe understand some rough attributes like tall or wearing a hat, detect obvious interactions like talking or hugging, and then automatically generate the right kinds of prompts to feed into Prompt HMR.
That would make the whole system way more practical, much more autonomous. The VLM provides the clues automatically.
That's the vision. And they also mention exploring even more types of side information. You know, imagine providing prompts not just about shape or interaction, but maybe about the person's specific activity. Are they running, sitting, jumping? Or prompts about the 3D layout of the environment, or even specific body measurements if you happen to have them.
So the whole concept of prompting is really a flexible framework. It could grow as we figure out new kinds of useful side information, or just get better at generating the existing ones automatically.
Exactly. And I think what's most compelling, perhaps the paper's broadest vision, is how this work points towards a potentially powerful future for AI perception in general.
How so?
Prompt HMR is kind of framed as a potential collaborator. It could work with systems that are great at high-level semantic understanding, like those VLMs we just talked about, and also with systems that are really precise metric regressors, which is essentially what Prompt HMR is for 3D human geometry.
So it's not just trying to build one giant AI model that does absolutely everything, but instead having specialized AI components that can work together, guided by these prompts.
Exactly that. The VLM understands the what's happening and what are these people generally like aspects, but maybe it's not built for super precise 3D reconstruction. Prompt HMR is built for that geometric precision, but it can be significantly improved and guided by the VLM's semantic insights, passed along via the prompts.
Yeah.
This kind of synergy where different AI capabilities combine their strengths, guided by these explicit contextual cues or prompts, it just feels like it has immense potential for really understanding complex visual scenes, especially scenes involving humans and all their complicated interactions.
That really does feel like a paradigm shift. Moving beyond just trying to brute force, improve pixels in, parameters out models towards a system where external knowledge and semantic understanding actively shape and improve precise 3D perception.
It fundamentally redefines the input. It's not just pixels anymore. It's pixels plus relevant context plus semantic guidance.
So thinking about that future then, what does this kind of collaborative, promptable approach really mean for how AI is going to perceive and understand the world, especially complex human activities? Prompt HMR seems to show us one really compelling path forward, where systems that grasp meaning can guide systems that capture precise geometry. It definitely leaves you wondering, what other kinds of side information are just waiting out there that could completely change how AI makes sense of everything it sees?